He was a man who had everything: a billion-dollar empire, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, and the adoration of a city that bowed to his success. Sebastian Sterling believed he owned the world, and that included his beautiful pregnant wife, Rachel. He'd laugh a deep rumbling sound that filled their sterile apartment, telling her that her only job was to produce his heir. He called her his pretty, powerless incubator. But in the hushed, wood-paneled courtroom, under the cold gaze of a judge who couldn't be bought, that laughter would die in his throat. This is the story of how a woman, with nothing but the strength of a mother's love, brought a king to his knees, all culminating in 5 words he never saw coming. Rachel Rosie had once believed in fairy tales, not the saccharine animated kind, but the sophisticated modern fables spun in the glossy pages of magazines. The ones where a girl with a good heart and a sharp mind meets a man of immense power and finds not a master, but a partner. For a while she thought she'd found that with Sebastian Sterling. Their meeting was the stuff of New York legend. She was a junior art curator, passionately defending a new installation to a skeptical patron at a Soho gallery. He was the patron. Sebastian, with his storm-grey eyes and a smile that could disarm world leaders, hadn't just been intrigued by the art, he'd been captivated by her fire. He bought the entire collection on the spot and asked her to dinner in the same breath. The courtship was a whirlwind of breathtaking excess. Private jets to Paris for brunch, front row seats at Milan Fashion Week, a black Amex in her wallet, with the casual instruction to have fun. Sebastian wasn't just wealthy, he was a force of nature, a titan of industry, whose company, Sterling Global, had its tendrils in everything, from tech to real estate. He was brilliant, ambitious, and devastatingly charming. Rachel, who had grown up in a loving but modest home in Queens, the daughter of a history professor and a librarian, was swept away. She fell in love not with the money, but with the man she thought he was a visionary, who saw something special in her. They married within a year at a lavish ceremony on the Amalfi Coast that was more a statement of power than a celebration of love. And for the first year, the dream held. Rachel brought warmth to his stark architectural penthouse. She filled it with books, and life advised him on his art acquisitions, and hosted dinners where her intelligence and grace impressed his circle of stone-faced business associates. She thought she was building a life with him, a partnership. She was wrong. The change was subtle at first, a slow erosion of her identity. It began with the jokes. At a dinner with the board of directors, when someone asked Rachel for her take on the European market, Sebastian had laughed. "Darling, the only market my wife knows is the farmer's market," he'd said, patting her hand. "Don't trouble her pretty head with numbers." The table chuckled politely. Rachel felt a hot blush creep up her neck, but she smiled, playing the part of the amused, doting wife. It was just his way, she told herself, a clumsy, old-fashioned attempt at humor. But the jokes became more frequent, more pointed. Her opinions were cute. Her former career was a sweet little hobby. He began calling her his greatest acquisition, a beautiful piece for his collection. The partnership she envisioned was a mirage. Sebastian didn't want a partner. He wanted a possession. The confirmation of her pregnancy should have been a moment of shared joy. Rachel had hoped it would be the one thing that truly connected them, that would soften his increasingly sharp edges. When she showed him the positive test, her hands trembling with a mixture of excitement and fear, he simply nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Good," he said, turning back to the financial news on the television. "Sterling Global needs an heir. See to it that you're taking all the right vitamins. I'll have my assistant schedule an appointment with Dr. Alistair Finch. He's the best, handles all the high-profile births." There was no hug, no shared, tearful moment, no whispered dreams for their child. It was a transaction, a project to be managed. The project, she soon learned, was hers, and hers alone, but the product, the child, was his. As her body changed, so did Sebastian's behavior. The jokes now centered on her pregnancy. At a charity gala, a photographer had asked for a photo of the happy couple. Sebastian had placed a hand on her growing belly, a proprietary gesture for the cameras, and leaned in. "Careful now," he'd boomed to the photographer. "The incubator is in a delicate phase." Laughter rippled through the onlookers. Flashbulbs popped. Rachel felt like a specimen in a zoo. Later that night, as she struggled to unzip the back of her designer gown, she confronted him. "Why would you say that, Sebastian, the incubator?" It was humiliating. He turned from his closet, pulling off his tie. He wasn't angry, not even defensive. He looked genuinely baffled that she was upset. "Oh, lighten up, Izzy," he said, using the nickname she despised. "It's just a joke. You're so sensitive lately. It must be the hormones." He tossed the silk tie onto a valet stand. "Besides, what's the problem? It's what you are. You're carrying my son. It's the most important job you'll ever have. You should be proud." "A son? We don't know that it's a boy." "It'll be a boy," he stated with absolute certainty, as if he could bend reality to his will. "I need a son to take over the company one day." And the conversation was over. He dismissed her feelings as a hormonal symptom, a temporary inconvenience. And in that moment, staring at his reflection in the vast mirror, Rachel understood the chilling reality of her situation. She wasn't his wife, his partner, or the mother of their child. She was a vessel, a piece of high-end biological equipment hired to perform a function. The true terrifying depth of his dismissiveness came into focus a few weeks later. They were hosting a pre-holiday party. The penthouse was filled with the city's elite hedge fund managers, tech moguls, political figures. The air hummed with power. Rachel, now 6 months pregnant and feeling weary, was speaking with a kindly older woman, the wife of a federal judge, about her hopes for the baby. "I've started setting up the nursery," Rachel said, her voice soft. "I'm thinking of a mural, maybe something with stars and constellations." Sebastian appeared at her side, a glass of scotch in his hand. He draped a heavy arm over her shoulders. "Listen to her," he announced to the small group, his voice carrying. "Planning the decor. It's wonderful, isn't it? Women have such a talent for these domestic things." He took a sip of his drink. "I handle the important stuff, of course. The trust fund is established. I've already secured his place on the waitlist for the Phillips Exeter Academy class of 2043. My legal team is finalizing the preliminary guardianship documents just in case." The judge's wife, a woman named Ms. Genevieve Atherton, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Guardianship documents, isn't that a bit premature? And surely you and Rachel would be co-guardians." Sebastian let out his signature booming laugh. It was the laugh that had once charmed her and now made her blood run cold. Of course," he said, squeezing Rachel's shoulder a little too tightly. "A formality. But let's be realistic. In the grand scheme of things, what real power does she have?" He gestured vaguely at her. "She has no income. No assets in her name. The prenup was quite clear on that. Her name isn't on this apartment or any of the properties. She's my wife and I adore her, but in the eyes of the law and the world, she's entirely dependent on me. Her power comes from me." He said it with a smile as if it were the most natural, amusing observation in the world. He believed it, every single word. He was stating what to him was an indisputable fact. He laughed again, looking around for affirmation. The small group offered weak, uncomfortable smiles. But Rachel wasn't smiling. She was frozen. The casual cruelty, the public declaration of her powerlessness, struck her with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a joke. It was a threat, a statement of absolute control. He was telling her and the world that she was nothing, a beautiful, pregnant, and utterly powerless woman living in his gilded cage. And as his laughter echoed off the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering, indifferent city, a tiny cold spark of defiance ignited in her heart. He was wrong. He had to be wrong. She would prove him wrong. The weeks following the disastrous party were a study in cold clarity for Rachel. The veil had not just been lifted, it had been shredded. Sebastian's words echoed in her mind, a constant, chilling reminder of her status in his world. What real power does she have? The question replayed itself as she walked the silent, cavernous halls of the penthouse, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, which now felt less like a promise and more like a ticking clock. Sebastian, oblivious to the storm he had unleashed within her, continued his life uninterrupted. His days were a whirlwind of board meetings, international calls, and power lunches. His evenings were for cultivating his empire at galas and exclusive clubs. The baby was a concept, a future asset, not a present reality that required any change in his behavior. He missed the 20-week ultrasound, the appointment where they could have learned the baby's gender. A last-minute, unavoidable meeting with investors from Tokyo had come up. He'd sent a text message, not even bothering to call. "Sorry, darling. Deal of a lifetime. Have them print a picture for me. S." Rachel sat alone in the darkened room, the cool gel on her stomach, a stark contrast to the burning anger in her chest. She watched the grainy black and white image on the screen, a tiny perfect spine, a fluttering heartbeat, a small hand waving from the darkness. The technician, a warm woman named Maria, pointed out the features. And then she asked the question. "Do you want to know?" Maria asked gently. "If it's a boy or a girl?" Rachel hesitated. This was a moment she was supposed to share, a memory to be created together. But Sebastian wasn't there. He had chosen a deal over this. In that sterile, quiet room, a profound loneliness washed over her. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Please, tell me." "It's a girl," Maria said, smiling. "A healthy baby girl. A girl. Not the heir Sebastian had decreed. A daughter." A wave of fierce, protective love surged through Rachel, so potent it left her breathless. This wasn't an asset for Sterling Global. This was her daughter. And she would not be raised in a world where her father publicly declared her mother powerless. That evening, when Sebastian finally returned home long after midnight, smelling of expensive whiskey and victory, he found her sitting in the dark living room. "We closed it," he announced, shrugging off his coat. "The Nakatomi deal, a masterstroke." He switched on a lamp, and his triumphant expression faltered slightly when he saw her face. "What's with the long face? I told you it was important. I went to the ultrasound today, Sebastian." "I know. Did you get the picture?" he asked already, moving towards the bar. "It's a girl," she said, her voice steady. He stopped his back to her. He didn't turn around for a long moment. The only sound was the clink of a crystal decanter. "A girl," he finally said, his voice flat. He poured his drink and turned, leaning against the bar. He took a slow sip. "Well, we'll try for a boy next time then. It's not the end of the world." It wasn't his disappointment that shattered her. It was the casual dismissal, the immediate pivot to the next attempt, as if this child, their daughter, was a failed prototype. "Her name is not next time," Rachel snapped, her voice rising. "She is our daughter." Sebastian looked at her, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Rachel. Of course she's our daughter. But the firstborn should have been a boy. It's a matter of legacy, of tradition. You wouldn't understand. What I don't understand is you." She shot back, standing up. Her body trembled, but her resolve was hardening into steel. "I don't understand how you can be so callous. This is our child, and I'm providing for her better than 99.9% of the children on this planet." He thundered, his voice suddenly booming in the vast space. He slammed his glass down on the marble bar. "She will have the best of everything. The best clothes, the best schools, the best homes. What more do you want? Do you think your job is hard? You rest, you shop, you plan your little nursery. I'm out there in the real world, a world you can't even begin to comprehend, building the empire that will give her all of that. So don't you dare lecture me on being a father." The argument ended there, as they always did with him, asserting his dominance and her retreating into wounded silence. But something was different this time. The silence was no longer one of submission. It was one of calculation. The next day, Rachel began to prepare for a war Sebastian didn't even know was coming. She started with her past. She called her oldest friend, Chloe Jensen, a sharp, no-nonsense journalist she had drifted away from after marrying Sebastian. Chloe had never liked him, seeing past the charm to the chilling arrogance beneath. Chloe's voice was a welcome shock of warmth and sanity. "My God, I haven't heard from you in ages. I thought you'd been absorbed into the Sterling Borg." Rachel let out a choked laugh that sounded more like a sob. "I need your help, Chloe. I need a friend." They met at a small, out-of-the-way cafe in the West Village, a place Sebastian would never frequent. As Rachel poured out the whole story, the jokes, the public humiliation, the incubator comment, the reaction to their daughter, Chloe, listened, her expression growing harder with every word. "That's not just arrogance," Chloe said, reaching across the table to grip her hand. "That's textbook narcissistic abuse. The gaslighting, the devaluing, the financial control. It's all there. He's isolated you and made you believe you're worthless without him. He said I have no power." Rachel whispered the words tasting like ash. "And Chloe, he's right. The prenup is ironclad. I signed it. I was in love and I didn't really read it." His lawyer explained it as a formality to protect his family's assets. "Let me guess," Chloe said dryly. "It stipulates that in the event of a divorce, you walk away with next to nothing, and any claims to his future earnings or assets are waived." Rachel nodded miserably. "Basically, there's a small settlement, but it's insulting, not enough to live on in this city for more than a year or two, and it's contingent on a non-disclosure agreement so tight I wouldn't be able to tell anyone my real name." "Okay," Chloe said, her journalistic instincts kicking in. "Okay, that's the financial side. But there's something more important at stake here, isn't there? The baby." "My daughter Rachel," corrected, her voice firm. "He sees her as a disappointment, a placeholder. He talks about her like she's a commodity. He'll control her whole life, Chloe. He'll shape her into what he wants, and he'll teach her that her mother is a weak, powerless woman." "I can't let that happen." "Then you have to fight him," Chloe said simply. "Not for the money, for her." A new terrifying thought began to form in Rachel's mind. It wasn't just about leaving him anymore. It was about taking her daughter with her, completely. The final push came a week later, a twist so cruel it felt like something out of a screenplay. Sebastian was on a business trip to London. Rachel was feeling unwell and decided to work from home using the large iMac in Sebastian's home office, a room she rarely entered. It felt like his private sanctuary, cold and impersonal, dominated by a massive mahogany desk. She was looking for a document she had saved to the cloud when she accidentally opened his personal email. It was careless, a misclick, but the subject line of the top email made her freeze. Project Nursery. Update and surveillance install. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Surveillance. She clicked it open. It was an email chain between Sebastian and his head of security. He had ordered the installation of high-end concealed cameras in the nursery she was so lovingly designing. And not just cameras, audio recorders too. Client wants 27 monitoring cloud-based storage and real-time access from his devices. One email read, "Full coverage of the room crib and changing area. He wants to be able to monitor the nanny and the mother's interactions with the child at all times. Discretion is paramount. The mother is not to be aware of the system." Rachel felt sick. This went beyond control. This was a level of Orwellian paranoia that was deeply disturbing. He wasn't planning to be a hands-off father. He was planning to be a remote warden. He would be watching her every move, judging her every interaction with their daughter, collecting data. For what? To use against her, to prove her incompetence. She scrolled down the email chain, her hands shaking. And then She saw the attachment. It was a PDF, a revised legal document from his attorneys. She clicked it open. It was a draft of a sole custody agreement. It was dense with legalese, but the intent was brutally clear. It cited his financial stability, his ability to provide, and contained clauses that would severely limit her access to the child if she ever behaved in a manner contrary to the child's best interests. A phrase so vague it could mean anything he wanted it to. It was a preemptive strike, a legal weapon, ready and waiting for the moment he might need it. He wasn't just planning for a contingency, he was laying the groundwork to take her daughter away from her. The cold, calculating cruelty of it stole her breath. He would let her carry this child, give birth to her, and then, when it suited him, he would use his immense power and wealth to cast her aside and raise their daughter alone. His words from the party came rushing back, no longer a casual boast, but a clear statement of intent. What real power does she have? Rachel stood up from the desk, a single cold tear tracing a path down her cheek. She walked out of the office, leaving the damning email on the screen. The gilded cage was no longer just a prison for her, it was one he was building for her child. The fight was no longer a choice, it was a necessity. Her daughter's freedom, her very future depended on it. The war had begun. The discovery in Sebastian's office was the final brutal catalyst. The theoretical threat had become a documented plan. For 2 days, Rachel moved through the penthouse like a ghost, a storm of terror and fury raging within her. She performed her role flawlessly. She smiled when Sebastian called from London, discussed her day in placid tones, and approved the caterer for an upcoming business dinner. On the outside, she was the placid, compliant wife. On the inside, she was a strategist plotting a revolution. Her first move was guided by Chloe's sharp advice. You need a shark Izzy, not a family lawyer who handles amicable splits in the suburbs. You need someone who isn't afraid of a man like Sebastian Sterling, someone who sees a giant and looks for a slingshot. Chloe had made some calls through her network of investigative journalists and came back with the name Anya Sharma. She wasn't a household name splashed across tabloids. Her firm was boutique, discreet, and had a reputation in the circles of the ultra-wealthy for being the place you went when the stakes were impossibly high and your opponent seemed invincible. Her specialty was complex high-conflict divorces involving hidden assets and custody battles against powerful narcissists. She was, in Chloe's words, a giant slayer. Getting an appointment was a challenge in itself. It required a referral and a significant consultation fee, which Rachel didn't have. The black Amex Sebastian gave her was for shopping, not for funding a rebellion against him. Every charge was itemized on a statement his accountants reviewed. This was her first test: how to get untraceable cash. Rachel thought back to her life before Sebastian. She still had her personal savings account long dormant with a few $1,000s from her old curator salary. But the real treasure was something Sebastian had always dismissed as clutter: her late grandmother's jewelry. It wasn't extravagant, a few gold brooches, a sapphire ring, a string of pearls. To Sebastian, they were worthless trinkets. To Rachel, they were her emergency fund. With a plausible excuse of getting a clasp repaired, she took a taxi, paying in cash she'd taken as grocery money, to a reputable jeweler in the Diamond District, a world away from the Fifth Avenue boutiques she now frequented. The elderly man behind the counter, Mr. Chen, recognized the quality of the older pieces. She sold the sapphire ring and one of the brooches. It felt like a betrayal of her grandmother's memory, but she comforted herself with a new mantra: this is for my daughter. She walked out with nearly $10,000 in cash, a sum that felt like both a fortune and nowhere near enough. The offices of Sharma and Associates were in a discreet brownstone on the Upper East Side, blending in seamlessly with the private residences of the elite. There was no grand sign, only a small brass plaque. The interior was quiet, elegant, and radiated a sense of calm, formidable power. Anya Sharma was not what Rachel had expected. She was a petite woman in her late 40s with intelligent, dark eyes that missed nothing. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored sheath dress and minimal jewelry. She didn't radiate aggression, she radiated intellect. She listened to Rachel's entire story, without interruption, her expression unreadable. She reviewed the prenuptial agreement Rachel had managed to photograph page by page on her phone. She read the transcribed quotes, the dates of missed appointments, the chilling details from the email about the nursery surveillance. When Rachel finished, her voice raw with emotion, Anya was silent for a full minute. She steepled her fingers, her gaze fixed on a point just past Rachel's shoulder. "He is a formidable opponent, Ms. Rossi," Anya said, her voice calm and measured. It was the first time in years someone had called her by her own name. "Sebastian Sterling has the financial resources to bankrupt you in legal fees, and the social capital to paint you as an unstable, vindictive gold digger. He will try to crush you, not just in court, but in the court of public opinion." Rachel's heart sank. "So you're saying it's hopeless? I'm saying you need to understand the battlefield you're stepping onto." Anya corrected her eyes, finally meeting Rachel's. And for the first time, Rachel saw a flicker of something else in them, a warrior's spirit. He has made one critical, catastrophic mistake, however, the mistake that arrogant men like him always make. "What's that?" Rachel asked, leaning forward. "He has underestimated you," Anya said. "Completely. His own words prove it. What real power does she have? He doesn't see you as a threat. He sees you as a possession that is malfunctioning. That is our advantage. We will use his arrogance against him." Anya laid out the strategy. It was terrifying and brilliant. "First, you will do nothing. You will go home and you will be the perfect, loving, slightly hormonal, pregnant wife. You will not give him any reason to suspect that you know his plans. We cannot file for divorce first. He needs to believe he is in complete control. But the custody agreement he's drafting is a gift," Anya said, with a thin smile. "It establishes his premeditated intent to remove you from your child's life, not based on your fitness as a mother, but on his desire for control. We will let him build our case for us." The second part of the strategy was evidence gathering. Anya gave Rachel a new phone paid for by the firm and a list of instructions. Rachel was to become a meticulous archivist of her own life. She was to document every dismissive comment, every threat veiled as a joke, every time he prioritized his work over the well-being of the pregnancy. She was to save every text record, conversations, when legally permissible in their state, and keep a detailed time-stamped journal. "He believes your world is small and domestic," Anya explained. "So we will use that world to hang him. His control is your prison, but it's also his trap. He's the one putting the bars in place, and we'll have him on record doing it." A twist emerged during their second meeting a week later. Anya's team had done a deep dive into Sebastian's finances. While his wealth was immense, they found something interesting. A significant portion of his recent liquidity was being funneled into a new, highly speculative venture capital fund based in the Cayman Islands. "He's moving money," Anya said, pointing to a flowchart on a tablet. "Aggressively. It looks like he's trying to shield these assets, making them harder to trace and value in any potential legal proceeding. He might be preparing for a corporate takeover, or he might be preparing for a divorce he plans to initiate, ensuring his most liquid funds are out of reach." This confirmed it. The sole custody agreement wasn't just a contingency. It was part of a larger orchestrated plan to sever his life from hers, with maximum damage to her and minimum damage to his bottom line. Rachel went home armed with this knowledge, a silent fury burning in her veins. Playing the part of the docile wife was the hardest acting job of her life. She would sit through dinners where Sebastian would regale guests with stories of his business acumen, all while knowing he was actively plotting to discard her and steal her child. She would smile as he patted her stomach and made a joke about her one important job, wanting to scream at the hypocrisy. One evening, he came home in a rare good mood. He'd brought her a gift. It was a diamond necklace, a cascade of brilliant stones that must have cost a fortune. For my beautiful incubator, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. He fastened it around her neck. For doing such a good job. The coldness of the diamonds felt like a chain. In the past, she might have cried with gratitude. Now she looked at his reflection in the mirror behind him and felt nothing but contempt. "It's beautiful, Sebastian. Thank you," she said, her voice a perfect imitation of her former self. Later that night, after he was asleep, she slipped out of bed. In the guest bathroom, she turned on the voice recorder app on the new phone Anya had given her. Date, November 28th. She whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "Sebastian gave me a diamond necklace today. He called me his incubator again. Said it was a reward for doing a good job. He's treating me like livestock, bribing me with trinkets while he drafts legal documents to take our daughter away from me." She took a shuddering breath. "The necklace feels like a payment. A down payment for my child." She saved the recording. It was one more piece of evidence. One more stone for her slingshot. The ultimate test of her nerve came a month before her due date. Sebastian announced he was hosting his company's annual holiday party at the penthouse. It was a massive affair with over 200 guests. "I need you to be perfect, Izzy," he'd commanded. "You're the face of my home life. You reflect on me." Rachel saw her opportunity. With Chloe's help, she arranged for a guest to be added to the list. He was an old friend of Chloe's, a man named David Chen, who happened to be Mr. Chen's nephew and worked as a freelance sound engineer. Chloe had spun a believable story to Sebastian's assistant about a promising new artist David represented that Sterling Global might be interested in. On the night of the party, David arrived with a briefcase. He was unassuming, blending in perfectly. While Rachel distracted Sebastian, introducing him to a city councilman, David went to use the powder room near the nursery. It took him less than 5 minutes. Using a sophisticated bug-sweeping device, he not only confirmed the locations of Sebastian's hidden cameras and microphones, but also installed a tiny, independent listening device of their own, one that fed directly to a secure cloud server controlled by Anya Sharma's firm. It was a huge risk. If they were caught, it could destroy any legal case she had. But as Anya had argued, in a war of information, the side with the best intelligence wins. He has put your entire life under surveillance. It's time to level the playing field. As Rachel stood in her shimmering maternity gown, smiling graciously at Sebastian's business partners, she felt a profound shift within herself. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach. But it was now overlaid with something new, the cold, hard resolve of a fighter. She was no longer just a victim of his schemes. She was an active participant in his downfall. The gilded cage was now bugged, its secrets being piped directly to her legal team. She had forged her fear into a weapon, and she was ready to use it. The first move in Sebastian's endgame was delivered not with a bang, but with a quiet, chilling formality. His parting kiss that Tuesday morning was as detached as ever, a routine gesture before he left for a breakfast meeting. 10 minutes later, the doorman buzzed. A man in a severe suit, a process server named Mr. Graves, was in the lobby. He delivered a thick manila envelope into Rachel's trembling hands with 2 cold words, "You've been served." The envelope felt like a block of ice. She knew instinctively what it was. This was Sebastian's declaration of war, timed for maximum cruelty, just weeks before her due date. Sinking onto a sofa, she tore it open. The documents were even more brutal than she could have imagined. It was a petition for divorce, bundled with a motion for an emergency temporary custody order. The legalese was dense, but the objective was brutally simple: to grant Sebastian sole, legal and physical custody of their child the instant she was born. The petition was a masterwork of fiction designed to assassinate her character. It painted a portrait of Rachel as mentally fragile and emotionally volatile, her behavior made erratic by pregnancy. It twisted her quiet, gentle nature into a reclusive and depressive tendency. Her lack of an independent income was cited as proof she could not provide a stable environment. The most vicious blow was a sworn affidavit from a psychiatrist she'd never met who, based solely on observations provided by Mr. Sterling, expressed grave concerns about her fitness for motherhood. It was a legal blitzkrieg designed to terrify her into immediate submission. He would let her endure pregnancy and childbirth only to legally sever her from her daughter at the moment of her birth. The sheer calculated cruelty of it stole her breath. Shaking, she called Anya Sharma, her voice cracking as she choked out the details. "Breathe!" Rachel Anya's voice was a firm, steady anchor in the swirling chaos. "This is the move of a desperate bully. It's aggressive, it's ugly, and it is full of holes. He has fired the first shot. Now we return fire." Within the hour, Rachel was in a taxi, clutching the hateful documents on her way to Anya's office. A war room had already been assembled. Anya and her team stood ready. "He's catastrophically arrogant," Anya declared, her eyes blazing as she scanned the pages. "He's so convinced of your powerlessness that he's put his entire malicious strategy on paper. This isn't a legal petition, it's a confession of his intent. We are going to tear it to shreds." The counter-strategy was swift and decisive. First, Anya instructed, "You cannot stay in that apartment. It's hostile territory. He is monitoring you, and you are not safe there. When you leave today, you leave for good." Rachel's friend Chloe was her salvation. Her small, secure one-bedroom in Brooklyn was no penthouse, but it was a sanctuary. It was safety. The next few hours were a blur of purposeful, clandestine action. Rachel had planted the idea of a pre-baby nesting weekend at a spa with Sebastian weeks before. It was the perfect cover. She returned to the apartment one last time, not as its mistress, but as a fugitive gathering supplies. She ignored the designer clothes, the jewelry, the empty trappings of her gilded cage. Instead, she packed her personal documents, the burner phone from Anya, and her meticulous journal. She packed the few precious baby items she had bought herself with her own money, including a soft cotton sleeper with little yellow ducks. As she clutched it, she wept, not from fear, but from the ferocious gathering strength of a mother. She walked out of the penthouse for the last time with a single suitcase and her purse. The doorman, wishing her a pleasant spa weekend, had no idea he was witnessing a prison break. The taxi didn't go to a spa. It crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, taking her toward freedom. The moment Chloe opened the door and wrapped her in a fierce hug, the crushing weight on Rachel's chest finally began to lift. While Rachel secured her sanctuary, Anya Sharma unleashed her legal arsenal. She filed a blistering response to Sebastian's petition, meticulously dismantling his claims. The fraudulent psychiatric affidavit was attacked as a malicious fabrication. But Anya didn't just defend, she launched a devastating counter-offensive. She filed a cross-petition for divorce, accusing Sebastian of a pattern of severe and calculated emotional abuse. Attached was a detailed log from Rachel's journal, a damning chronology of every joke, every public humiliation, and every dismissive comment. It painted a chilling, undeniable portrait of a man systematically attempting to obliterate his wife's spirit. Then came the legal bombshell. Anya filed for an emergency financial restraining order, supported by the forensic accountant's report, that clearly showed the $50 million transfer to the Cayman Islands. She argued this was a blatant attempt to defraud Rachel and to hide money that should be considered for child support, proving his motive was not his child's welfare, but his own greed. The papers landed on Sebastian's desk like a grenade. According to Chloe's source inside Sterling Global, he read them, his face contorting from confusion to a mask of purple rage. He had expected her to crumble and beg. He had never conceived of a counterattack of such ferocity and precision. His reaction was as swift as it was predictable. He cut her off completely. The credit cards were declined, the joint accounts frozen. He intended to starve her into submission, proving his point that without him, she was nothing. But he was too late. Rachel was already insulated, protected by Anya's strategy and Chloe's loyalty. Anya's firm fronted the considerable legal fees confident in their case. "Consider it an investment in justice," she'd said. The final critical piece of evidence, the twist that exposed the true depth of Sebastian's depravity, came from the listening device they had planted. 2 days after the filings, it captured a conversation between Sebastian and Marcus Thorne. Sebastian was incandescent with rage. How did she find out about the Caymans? "Who is this Sharma woman? I want her ruined, Marcus. I want Rachel left with nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing!" Thorne's voice was the calm hiss of a snake. "The financial trail is a problem, Sebastian. But we can fight it. The real war is custody. We must prove she is unfit. Your observations are a start, but we need something undeniable." "What are you suggesting?" Sebastian demanded. "We use our asset," Thorne replied coolly. "The surveillance in the nursery. The moment she has the child, we will be watching. Every moment of frustration, every time the baby is left to cry, every exhausted eye. We record it all. We can edit it, create a compilation, and build a narrative of neglect and instability. By the time we get to a final hearing, the judge will see a concerned, loving father desperate to save his child from an overwhelmed, incompetent mother. When Anya played the recording for Rachel, the world went silent. It was evil, pure and simple. They were plotting to weaponize her most vulnerable moments as a new mother against her. Anya calmly saved the audio file. She labeled it, "Exhibit a conspiracy to commit fraud on the court." The hearing was set for the following week. Rachel was 39 weeks pregnant. She would walk into that courtroom carrying the very child they were fighting over. The war had been declared. The first battle was about to begin. The Honorable Judge Eleanor Davies presided over New York County Family Court with a reputation forged in steel. She was a woman impervious to the influence of wealth and immune to the theatrics of high-powered lawyers. Her courtroom was a place where carefully constructed facades came to crumble, and on this day, Sebastian Sterling's grand edifice was set for demolition. It was into this crucible that Rachel Rossi, just 2 days after giving birth, walked to fight for the future of her child. The physical toll of childbirth was evident in her pallor and the carefulness of her movements, but it was overshadowed by a new strength that radiated from her. Dressed in a simple navy dress, her gaze was clear and unwavering. Flanked by the calm, formidable presence of Anya Sharma, she was not the picture of a victim, but of a survivor, ready for battle. Leaving her newborn daughter Sophia with Chloe had felt like leaving a piece of her own soul behind, but the ache was a potent fuel, a constant reminder of the stakes. Sebastian was already there, the center of his own universe. Encased in a flawless suit, he conferred with his notorious lawyer, Marcus Thorne, projecting an aura of aggrieved concern. He was performing the role of the devoted husband, worried sick by his wife's inexplicable actions. When he saw Rachel, his expression morphed into one of theatrical pity. He moved toward her arms, slightly open, a gesture of false magnanimity for the benefit of any onlookers. Anya Sharma moved with subtle speed, placing herself between her client and the approaching man. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice soft but absolute, "all communication will go through counsel." For a fleeting second, the mask of benevolence slipped from Sebastian's face, revealing a flash of reptilian fury. He recovered instantly, turning his expression to one of deep sorrow. "Of course," he lamented, his voice carrying through the hallway. "Anything for Rachel." Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The hearing was for temporary orders, a preliminary ruling that would decide where baby Sophia would live and how the couple's finances would be handled while the divorce proceeded. It was the first battle, and it would set the tone for the entire war. Marcus Thorne began, his voice a smooth, persuasive instrument. He wove a tale of a loving, stable husband, a titan of industry, utterly blindsided by his wife's sudden emotional collapse. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Sterling has one singular focus, the safety and well-being of his newborn daughter. He has spent months preparing to give her a life of unparalleled security. Ms. Rosie tragically has become unstable. Her behavior, likely exacerbated by her pregnancy, has grown erratic. She abandoned the marital home, ceased all communication, and is now making wild, baseless allegations. Mr. Sterling fears his daughter is in a volatile and unsafe environment. Thorne then moved to play his first card, attempting to introduce a sworn affidavit from a psychiatrist. Anya was on her feet before he could finish the sentence. Objection, Your Honor. This document is a transparent fraud. The doctor in question has never met, spoken to, or evaluated my client. His opinion is founded entirely on the self-serving, manipulative narrative provided by Mr. Sterling himself. It is a disgusting attempt to slander Ms. Rosie and has no evidentiary value. Judge Davies peered at the document over her spectacles, her expression souring. Mr. Thorne, did your client compensate this doctor for his time? He was paid for his professional services. Your Honor, Thorne conceded. So a doctor was paid to offer a remote diagnosis of a woman he's never met, who just so happens to be the opponent in a custody suit filed by the man who paid him. The judge's voice was dangerously quiet. Objection sustained. This document is garbage. Strike it from the record, and don't insult the court's intelligence with such tactics again. Thorne, though visibly rattled, pressed on, pivoting to Rachel's departure. She fled the home, Your Honor, with no notice. This is not the action of a stable mother. Anya rose, her posture one of serene confidence. My client did not flee, Your Honor. She escaped. She escaped an environment of pervasive psychological and emotional abuse. She left to protect herself and her unborn child from a man who systematically tried to destroy her sense of self. Anya methodically dismantled Thorne's narrative. She introduced Rachel's journal as a contemporaneous record of the abuse. She read one of Sebastian's jokes into the record, her voice clear and steady. Careful now, the incubator is in a delicate phase. Your Honor. These are the words Mr. Sterling chose to describe his wife while she carried their child. Not words of love or partnership. They are words of objectification, reducing her to a mere vessel for his legacy. Sebastian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The words sounded different in the cold, formal setting of the court, not like a clever quip, but like the cruel taunt they were. Anya then seamlessly transitioned to the financial restraining order. Mr. Sterling's counsel speaks of providing stability. Yet in the months prior to filing this action, my client's husband funneled over $50 million into a series of shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands. These are not the actions of a man seeking to stabilize a family's future. These are the actions of a man seeking to hide marital assets from his wife and child in anticipation of a divorce. The forensic accountant's preliminary report, with its undeniable paper trail, was submitted as evidence. A low murmur went through the courtroom. Sebastian's face hardened into a mask of rage. This set the stage for Anya's final, devastating move. She held the fate of the hearing in her hands, a single audio file. Your Honor. Anya said, her voice now grave. We have one final piece of evidence. It directly addresses Mr. Sterling's character, his credibility, and his fitness as a parent. It is an audio recording of a phone call between Mr. Sterling and his counsel, Thorne. Thorne leapt from his seat. Objection. This is an outrageous, illegal recording. It is a flagrant violation of attorney-client privilege and is completely inadmissible. Judge Davies held up a hand, silencing him. Her gaze on Anya was intense. Ms. Sharma, you are approaching a very dangerous line. What exactly is on this recording? It is a recording, Your Honor, in which Mr. Sterling and Mr. Thorne actively conspire to commit fraud upon this court. Anya stated clearly. They discussed their plan to use illegal surveillance cameras. Mr. Sterling secretly installed in the baby's nursery to capture, edit, and manipulate footage of Ms. Rossi. Their stated goal was to manufacture a false narrative of her being an unfit mother to present as evidence. They were planning to use a mother's most private, vulnerable moments with her newborn against her. A shocked stillness descended on the room. Thorne's face was ashen. Sebastian looked as though the floor had vanished beneath him. The judge's face was grim. The crime-fraud exception to attorney-client privilege is clear. I will hear this recording in my chambers. Immediately. Counsel will join me. The 10 minutes that followed were the longest of Rachel's life. When the judge and lawyers returned, Judge Davies's expression was thunderous. She looked at Thorne with undisguised disgust, then at Sebastian with utter contempt. She sat, adjusted her microphone, and her voice cut through the silence like a blade. I have reviewed the evidence. The recording is precisely what Ms. Sharma alleged. It is a craven and despicable plot to manipulate the justice system. Mr. Thorne, your conduct is an embarrassment to the legal profession. I will be filing a formal complaint with the State Bar's Disciplinary Committee. You should pray you have a license to practice by this time next year. She then fixed her piercing gaze on Sebastian. He visibly recoiled his power, an influence rendered utterly useless. Mr. Sterling, you have presented yourself as a concerned father. You are nothing of the sort. You are a manipulator. You have engaged in a campaign of vile psychological abuse against your wife. You have hidden assets like a common criminal. And you have conspired to commit fraud against this court. Your character has been laid bare, and it is ugly. She paused, allowing her words to hang in the air. This court's all and only mandate is the best interest of the child, Sophia Rossi. A child needs love, nurturing, and stability. A child needs a parent who views them as a precious life, not a corporate asset. It is blindingly clear to me which parent in this room is capable of providing that. The judge looked at Rachel, a glimmer of compassion in her eyes. Therefore, the following orders are effective immediately. The father's motion for temporary custody is denied. The mother's motion for a financial restraining order is granted. A full forensic audit of every asset, domestic and international, held by Mr. Sterling is so ordered. Rachel's body sagged with relief as tears began to stream down her face. Temporary sole legal and physical custody of the infant Sophia Grace Rossi is hereby awarded to her mother, Rachel Rossi. The judge picked up her pen, signed the order, and then looked up to deliver the final crushing blow to Sebastian's ego. Furthermore, given the father's demonstrated willingness to engage in deceptive and abusive behavior, the court finds it is in the child's paramount interest to be protected from his influence. To that end, the court officially designates the mother as the child's primary guardian. The words echoed in the silent room. Primary guardian. It was the ultimate repudiation of everything Sebastian believed. He stared speechless, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent fury. He had laughed at her powerlessness, but a judge had just vested her with the only power that had ever truly mattered. His carefully built world had been shattered not by a market crash, but by the quiet strength of the woman he had so foolishly underestimated. In the end, Sebastian Sterling, the man who moved markets with a whisper, was brought to his knees, not by a corporate raider or a stock market crash, but by the quiet, unshakable resolve of a mother he had written off as powerless. The final divorce settlement, informed by the court-ordered forensic audit that uncovered his schemes, was a far cry from the insulting pittance his prenuptial agreement had offered. But Rachel's victory wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in freedom. She moved into a sunlit brownstone in Brooklyn, creating a warm, loving home filled with books, art, and laughter. She raised Sophia not in the shadow of a narcissistic father, but in the light of a mother who had taught her that true power isn't about wealth or control. It's about courage, integrity, and the fierce, unbreakable love that empowers you to fight for your own happy ending. Did Rachel's story inspire you? Her journey is a powerful reminder that even when you feel powerless, your inner strength can change everything. If you believe in the power of fighting for what's right, please hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story of courage and triumph. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. We bring you compelling real-life stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening.